Stanford University.
Good evening. Welcome to the Stanford Contemplation by Design Summit. I am Dr. Tia Rich and have the honor of directing the program that invites us to cohere as a community to engage in contemplative practices, experience presence, open to new perspectives, and dedicate it all to public service. I invite you to just take a moment to pay attention to where we are. We're in CEMEX Auditorium. Many of you know CEMEX is a multinational Mexican company that specializes in aggregate building material, concrete, and ready-made cement. It struck me as I was trying to prepare for this evening that it was worth noting that as we come together to heal the divide in our country, that we are in a building that represents taking the abstract and making it real, concrete. Cement, making things cohere together that are differentiated. I don't need to introduce our speakers. You already know them by their fine reputation. But tonight we come together to be inspired by their service to us all in their own way as teacher Jack Kornfield, founder of Spirit Rock, monk, psychologist, author of The Path with Heart. And then Congressman Tim Ryan, who comes to us from the Heartland to share his centering prayer practice that he takes with him each day into our Congress to help realize this democratic experiment that we're all dedicated to bringing into greater reality each day. Without further ado, let's begin the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you also. Hi, Tim. Glad to.
I like you better with the hat on, Jack. I thought
I could put it back on, you know. Very happy to see you all here, and also a great pleasure to be with Tim, who I have a good, fond, loving connection with and a lot of respect for, and so I'm looking forward to the dialogue. Before we start, I'd like to ask a few questions just to get a little sense of the group that's assembled here. How many of you have a regular meditation practice of some kind? Okay. How many are sort of new to meditation? Virgins, oh my God, still around Stanford. There's a few. Welcome. Good. We'll talk to you too. All right. How many of you are students? Wonderful to see. How many of you are educators? Terrific. Business people? Yay. Artists? Okay. How many are in health and healing in some fashion or other? Lots of you. And then some of you brought your clients with you to kind of see if you can fix them. Okay. How many are in technology? Okay. Politicians? Yay, 2.
Me and you, brother.
Oh, okay. This is good to start, just to get to have this little bit of a connection. And then we talked about starting with a little meditation, but maybe there's something else you want to say before that, as you wish.
Not really. That's probably the best way to start, I think.
So we'll sit for 35 minutes. Messing with you, you know. Okay, 5 minutes maybe, with a little bit of guidance, since most of you already have a practice. One of the remarkable things about our human mind is that we can deliberately direct our attention. So you can put it up here and see Tim and myself. You can put your attention on the space in this room and feel how big it is. You can put your attention on your feet, on the floor. You can put it all kinds of places, and usually we don't think about it. We just attend to things. But one of the things that meditation invites us to do is to deliberately direct our attention, and from that, to begin to learn, or steady attention, learn in new ways. So let your eyes close gently. First, just take a minute to quiet yourself. Take a couple of deeper cleansing breaths. And with a sense of interest, a translation for mindfulness would be loving awareness, a kind interest. Begin to pay attention to the experience of your body seated here, halfway between heaven and earth in this human form. The places that ache or have pleasant sensations, tingle or itch, warm, cool. Begin to inhabit your body with awareness, with this kind attention. You might notice areas of tightness or tension that at some point will want to be released. And sometimes just noticing them, they start to soften a little bit as you bring a loving awareness to your body. And if your body could speak to you and say something or remind you of something, let yourself listen. What would it say? And sensing yourself now bringing body and mind together with this attention. Notice too how the body is breathing itself. You don't have to do anything, but bring your attention. You might feel the breath as coolness in the nostrils or swirling tingling in the back of the throat, or the rise and fall of chest or belly. And rest your attention in this beautiful act of the body breathing in the middle of everything else. Relax as you feel each breath. Let each breath bring a sense of calm or ease. And just as you can feel the breath breathing itself, that life is changing moment by moment with each breath, you'll also notice the changing waves of experience around the breath. Waves of thoughts will come and go. Waves of feelings, emotions, sad or happy, bored or interested. And you can notice at the same time how you can be aware of the breath breathing itself in the middle of it all. And as you calm with the breath, with loving awareness or mindfulness, the same loving awareness can notice the moods and states of the heart, sad or excited or joyful or bored, afraid or happy, without judgment. Just like the breath comes and goes, moods appear and disappear. And the same for thoughts and images. They arise in the space of awareness for a time and pass away. And you are now becoming the kind witness of the interior life of this mind and heart, and this body. And this witnessing, this mindfulness that knows the heart and mind and body, becomes a gateway or doorway to live more fully, more attentively, more wisely in yourself and in all the ways you respond to the world. When you're ready, let your eyes open gently. And keep the same sense of presence as best you can. So you begin to sense that meditation, most of you have some practice, isn't so much about creating a particular state or experience, but rather an invitation to a quality of presence, understanding, intimacy sometimes is the word that's used, for our own body and heart and mind. And then from that comes an ability to respond to the world rather than be reactive or caught up or frightened by things. You start to center yourself and realize, here I am, awake and present. So thank you for that.
I want to do it for another 30 minutes. I don't know how anyone else feels. Let me just say thank you to everyone for being here. I think this was, I wasn't sure what to expect coming out to Stanford because I didn't get in when I applied here, so I didn't know if they would not let me in the building. No, and it's always great to be with Jack, who I have a great deal of affection for as well. And Trudy, and have known him for a number of years now. And so to be up here in this place with you and with him at this really unique time in our country's history, I think we can it's probably not a bad jumping off point that the times we're living through here are very unique and are going to require all of us to tap into what Jack was just talking about, the ability to come from the inside out when it seems like we are getting pounded from the outside in. So thank you for being here.
And when we chatted, there are some questions that I want to ask you, and some things I might say as well. But back there, I asked you, what would your best intention be for this evening? What would you most want to communicate that you think would be of service to the folks who are here? And you had some interesting things to say.
So when you run for president, you travel a lot. And what I really started to reflect on throughout my travels is how much pain is in the country right now, and how so many people, so many of our fellow citizens are going through some really, really tough times. And there's just different versions of that. It could be struggling economically, it could be addiction, it could be mental health, it could be debt, it could be struggling to get proper health care coverage for your kids or a sick family member. It could be the normal stuff of, friends and family who are dying or have died or died too young. It's just to be on a trail, a trip to meeting people. The one thing I want everyone to know is that everyone's going through this. Like, let's help each other. Let's acknowledge it. And they may not have the same political beliefs as you, but if we can hit the reset button and start recognizing that we're all going through it, and we're never going to heal it if we don't acknowledge it and open up our hearts to each other. And it sounds kind of mushy to say on a campaign trail, but I think if we don't do that, that we're going to keep spinning our wheels.
And so there are a couple of things to respond to in that you say. The first, which is a kind of radical act that you're suggesting, and I respond in some way as a meditation teacher and a contemplative as well as a psychologist. You're actually saying that we should turn toward the suffering of the world and not live in denial about it. And that's not necessarily what our culture does. We live in a kind of addicted society that wants to keep you consuming and watching and doing and things like that, and that makes you a sort of productive wheel in the society. But it also takes the edge off and keeps you from actually looking clearly at what's happening. So that's the first radical thing. And in order to do that, I would then posit and say that the two main meditation streams that I have taught for the last 45 years, one is the quality of mindful presence, and the other are the heart practices of compassion and loving kindness. And people get afraid that if they actually let themselves look at what's happening, it'll be too much. They'll be overwhelmed. But it's not true. There's a kind of relief that comes. And that one of the gifts that the contemplative life can offer in meditation is you start to be able to sit and open the heart of compassion to all the suffering that you personally experience. Anybody not have that, by the way, in your life? Raise your hand, please. You can have your money back, right?
And I want to talk to you after.
Exactly. So you have your measure of sorrows, your measure of struggles, and every human does, as you say. And that you begin to trust that the heart of compassion, which was born in you, is big enough to hold all that. That your awareness and your kindness or your compassion and tenderness can hold all of that. And then that allows you to turn to the world in the same way. And then the second part, which you said, is that we can't do it alone. That every breath you just took dusted the tops of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa as it came over the Pacific to the west coast. It also dusted the Fukushima nuclear reactor. And we can't separate ourselves from the environment and the world and from one another. And modern politics, well, as we talked about it, for more than 100 years ago, one of the great political commentators, H.L. Mencken, said that the main aim of politics is to scare people and make them afraid so that they will vote for somebody who will save them. Will you save us? So the second part is equally important, that as you get quiet, the sense of separateness starts to dissolve in some way. You realize with every breath you take, with the emotions, with the relations, with the way that you live and move, that you're embedded in a world of connection, and that mindfulness has both sides. There's an inner side of presence, and then there's a side of mindful response. It's a compound word, sati sampajanya, mindful presence and mindful response. Then as you get quiet, if you see a child fall in front of you or somebody's in trouble, your heart just says, of course, let me help. It's not very complicated because we are in it together. So
when everything is trying to divide us, I mean, everything, I can give you examples within the political institutions of, where the money comes from and all of these other things. The media is dividing, fractured to where, and then the websites that you read, and it's a loop that just continue to push us away from each other. And I've always used the quote when I first wrote Healing America, Mindful Nation, a great quote by Reverend Jim Wallace, who said, "We don't need to go further to the left, we don't need to go further to the right, we all need to go deeper." And if you go deeper, you get that sense of connection. And what Jack and I were talking about earlier has become frustrating. Like, these problems we have are colossal. I mean, think about what's happening in the world, and which is why I like this environment as opposed to a debate stage where they say, okay, how are you going to fix 1/5 of the country's economy and the healthcare system? Go, you got 30 seconds. And I want all your points. Here we can take a step back, but think about everything that's happening. Globalization, right? And this has been happening for a while. And where I come from, in Ohio, Northeast Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, a lot of the mid-Atlantic states have been affected by globalization, where whole industries have gone away, ways of life gone away. Coal, steel, auto, rubber. So you have globalization, automation. We all know here more than anybody in the world, what's happening. We have cultural, we're trying to integrate one of the most diverse societies on earth. We have huge issues around income inequality, artificial intelligence, machine learning, I mean, on and on and on. All of these things are happening right now. And we're all mad that no one's fixed it, right? And it's their fault, and it's their fault. Look, there's plenty of blame to go around. But the reality is, how are we going to fix it? And what I've told people, like around climate change, just as one example, you're not going to reverse climate change without the business community. Without, I'm hostile to greed. I'm hostile to income inequality. I'm hostile to a concentration of wealth. You can't be hostile to the entire free enterprise system, because if we're going to ramp up the solution to capture carbon and reuse materials and do all the things that we need to do, we've got to figure at some level we've all got to be working together, or it's just not going to happen. And so how do we speak our piece, have our opinions, fix the parts of the problems that need to be fixed, but come together at some level to solve them?
So I have a couple of questions I was thinking about asking you. One is last week or whenever you ended your campaign for president. Are you relieved? Is it, and is there anything that you can say now that you couldn't say when you were?
I still have discretion, though.
I understand.
Judgment. Yeah, it was some relief. I mean, we were on the campaign trail for 7-8 months, and then a whole year before that, kind of traveling around the country. And I've got 3 kids and a beautiful wife. My wife, Andrea, and I have been married 6 years. She's a first-grade school teacher. We have 3 kids. Mason's 16, Bella's 15, and little Brady's 5. And so the time away was really, really hard. And we have 2 dogs. And so my wife was kind of really dealing with a lot of that. And I was away, and it sucked. Like I hated being away. I missed a couple of football games, and I was like, it's just, you're missing stuff. And so that was a relief. Like, I was home this weekend, and we were just like hanging out with the family and eating pancakes, and just like going to the football game and talking to the parents, and it was just a lot of fun to reconnect. So that part was a relief. But there was also like, there's regret. There's, how many times you look back. I played a lot of sports growing up, and I always think about after the game, you're like, I should have done this or I should have done that. Or when you try to, you're discipline your kid, and you're like, dang, why did I say that instead of that, or you're teaching a class or whatever. We all do that every time when we're interacting. And so you look back on those moments and you think, man, what could I have done differently? And again, that's where the practice comes in. You try not to hold on to it too much. You try to extract the lesson and then let it go. But there's a lot of relief, and my body's starting to calm down, my mind's starting to calm down. Because you travel, it's insane. Like, you get up at 4 in the morning sometimes, right? I'll give you a bad day. You get up, alarm goes off at 4, you drive an hour to the airport, like you pack your bag, get in the car, drive to the airport. Get to the airport, check your bag, run through the airport, get on a plane. Plane goes very fast for a while. And I went in New Hampshire, or I went in South Carolina where we were doing a lot of campaigning. My family joke was, you can't get there from here. Like, there's no direct flight from Ohio to Iowa, or Ohio to South Carolina. You got to go to Charlotte and get on another plane and go to Charleston, or you got to go to Minnesota and then down to Iowa. So you're in the airport. Like, I know every restaurant in Chicago O'Hare Airport. And then you land and you get in the car, get your bags, you go to the place to get your car, you get the rental car, get in the rental car, throw your bags in the car, drive somewhere, campaign all day long, go to a hotel, get checked into the hotel. This stuff sucks. Like, when you're traveling, this is the worst part of traveling. You're like, you normally do that, and then you go to a beach and you sit there for a week. So you go there, you unpack the bag, you get in bed, you take off your clothes, you brush your teeth, you get in the bed, you fall asleep, you get up in the morning, you iron your clothes, you repack the bag that you just unpacked 7 hours before, you go downstairs, you get in the rental car, you drive to the airport, and you do the whole thing all over again. And so your body is just constantly in motion. And so the last week has been nice to just calm down.
I feel vaguely traumatized just hearing it. But there's something important about what you're saying, because it's a crazy system, actually. And there are a lot of things where we sort of have this American exceptionalism, and our election, there are other countries that do elections like Canada or England or so forth, and they do them in 6 weeks, or they do them in, anyway, but all right, so I have a different question for you, but I'm touched by it in some way, because I kind of wonder, okay, no wonder they're crazy there in Washington. Look at what they had to go through to get there. You wrote this book previously titled Mindful Nation, Now Healing America. And you gave it to every member of Congress. The simple question is, did any of them read it? But the more underlying question is, when you say we need to come together, are there seeds of that in our political system, or do we have to do it a different way?
There are seeds They don't get water or sunshine or fertilizer. Well, I shouldn't say they don't get fertilizer.
We're in trouble.
Yeah, lots of fertilizer. Like I said, I mean, the system is really, everything's pulling us apart. And that's going to be the real trick on how we pull this thing back together. One of the things we started, I've been trying to do this for 5 years, and then I got on the committee to be able to do it last year, but we literally started a wellness program on Capitol Hill. And for the committee I sit on, we fund the entire Capitol Hill, the Botanical Gardens, the Library of Congress, all of the, the House of Representatives and all of that. And so I've been meaning to start this thing. And so we got it started. We got a huge health and wellness program. We literally have, I think, 5 or 6 mindfulness-based stress reduction teachers that are now trained to be able to teach to staff people on Capitol Hill, hopefully members of Congress on Capitol Hill. We're creating a space where we can have quiet rooms where people can go in and practice. So what I want to do is, we do this and write a book and we have the national conversation, but literally within the legislative branch of Congress, we literally have created a system that's put in place to begin to promote some of these practices. And we've brought teachers. Sharon Salzberg came to Capitol Hill. Andrew Weil came and taught us this breathing technique a few years ago. So we're trying to enhance the speaker series and just raise awareness, because today's chief of staff on Capitol Hill is tomorrow's congressperson. The staffer who's getting coffee today, like I did 20 years ago for my member of Congress that I work for, becomes a member of Congress. So if we can begin to establish these practices, and really it's part of the broader goal that I have. So the entire agenda that I was putting forth was like, how do you teach these practices in healthcare and actually have doctors get reimbursed? And how do you teach these practices in medical school? So you can go to your doctor and they'll literally teach you MBSR or TM or whatever, and instead of filling you with a bunch of prescriptions, like maybe you have to have prescriptions at some point, but that shouldn't be where we start. And how do we teach this stuff in our schools? How do we teach this stuff at our VA hospitals? So you begin to see how slowly over time, if we're going to fix the problem and not go left or right, but go deeper, that we actually have institutionalized some of these practices in all the various forms. And you see what Mark Benioff's doing at Salesforce, and you see what a lot of the business people are doing in their businesses with promoting it. So how do we just plant those seeds in all these other areas so that they'll emerge? And like Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. So if the public changes, the politicians will change.
I just want to get this book, forgot to pull it out. We have a common friend in England named Chris Ryan, who's a member of Parliament there. He's in the shadow cabinet. He's an older guy from Wales and salt of the earth, and everybody loves him because he's kind to the doormen and the people who serve food. And he's also the champion of changing the inner culture of British politics. So this is a report. Tim knows it well. It's called Mindful Nation UK. And we're initially 85 members of Parliament. Now there are quite a few more. In the summer before last, Trudy, my wife, beloved, and I were in England. We went to Oxford, and then we went to teach in Parliament. And Chris took us around, and then we sat with some of the Parliament mindfulness group. And there were people from both sides of the aisle, and from House of Lords as well as House of Commons. We did some quiet meditation, and then I led a guided meditation, which included somehow them being bequeathed a gift and a cloak from one of the great statesmen or people in generations before to help them in some way, inspire what they had to do. Anyway, after we sat, then they talked for a good part of an hour. And it was remarkably honest, vulnerable, real, thoughtful, and a couple of them, leaders, said, this is the best thing that happens to us all week, that we sit and get quiet and that we can then listen to each other. So I'm sort of echoing what you're saying and putting those seeds there. But at the same time, I also respect what you said about, I don't think it's going to come from politics. I think politics is going to follow it. And the movement of mindfulness and the movement of inner training and so forth is getting bigger because we need it. And I think it's actually going to come from us bottom up. And there's a couple more things I might say about that and then ask you a question. Vivek Murthy, who you might know, he had been the Surgeon General under Barack Obama. And we've been in a conversation. And he said it's his observation that more than half of what walks through the doors in our hospitals and our clinics and our medical system is emotional problems. That we live in a nation that doesn't know how to deal with our own inner emotions. And because of it, it gets manifest in all these ways, both in, whether it's physical illness and, all right, I guess I'll show you. Where is that page? One second. I brought these things here. This is from Wall Street Journal. First, the cover page of one of its sections, it says, so young and so many pills. And it's simply a chart of the tens of millions of prescriptions for kids, for ADHD medicine and antidepressants and antipsychotics and so forth. I'm all for medication when it's helpful, and it can be. But you all know that this is nuts, that we're over-medicating ourselves as a society. And then I'll read one more thing. And this is from James Baldwin. He writes, I imagine the reason that people cling to their hate and ignorance so stubbornly is because they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. And there's something profound in what he says. When we can't turn toward the suffering that we share and the beauty and the love that we share that comes out of it, compassion, when we can't turn toward our insecurity. Anybody in this room not a bit insecure? I mean, let's get real about this, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's called the wisdom of insecurity, to acknowledge that this is our human incarnation, our human lot. When we can't face it because we're afraid we're going to lose our power, we're losing our jobs, we project it on everybody else. It's the Mexicans, it's the immigrants, it's the black people, it's the people, it's China, it was the communists when I was young. They're coming back around as an enemy du jour, you know, because we don't have the emotional capacity yet in our schools and in our education. What Mindful UK was doing is trying to put it in the prison system, put it in their schools, put these capacities of social and emotional learning and inner regulation that we now know from neuroscience is so helpful and powerful to actually embed it in the lives of people who are there, both as they grow up and so forth. This feels like it's really revolutionary.
Yeah.
So I wonder what thoughts you have about all that.
Well, yes. It's you see it. You know, you see the deaths of despair, you see the suicide, you see the addiction, you see the mental health issues across the United States, across demographics, across income levels, gender. It's a problem across the board, and I think the Surgeon General had it right. And so, from our vantage point, from a policy perspective, what are the solutions? Well, there's no silver bullet. Of course, everybody needs health care as a human right, I believe. But what are we teaching in our schools? And one of the main initiatives I was pushing was to have a mental health counselor in every school building that needed it, and I think they all need it. And how do we implement robust social and emotional learning in every school district in the United States, to where you're teaching kids how to deal with conflict, how to deal with trauma. I mean, how do you have trauma-informed curriculum in our schools, and how do we teach teachers in our colleges and universities to begin to deal with the level of trauma that they're going to deal with in the local school districts. And we've seen, we've got to change I was reading a great book for like the 4th time. It's called A Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. And he was a family therapist, and he applied family therapy to organizations and countries. And one of the things he said was, if you want to pop out of like the dark ages, you got to start asking different questions. So I started thinking about what are the different questions that we need to ask. And around education, I think the shift is, how do we move from saying, how do we increase test scores? That's the question now, right? How do we get test scores up? To how do we take care of our kids? If we shift that question to how do we take care of our kids, what are they eating in the schools, right? What kind of food are they getting? Are we teaching them the social and emotional tools and giving them the social and emotional tools that they need? Are we teaching them conflict resolution, resiliency, deep listening, these kind of skills that they're going to be able to take into the world and be emotionally healthy and resilient? And what we found was with robust social and emotional learning programs is you get an 11 percentile point increase in test scores, which literally closes the achievement gap. And you get a 10% increase in good behavior, a 10% decrease in antisocial behavior. So the whole school changes. I've seen this happen across the country. And it is supported by both the Brookings Institution, which is a left-leaning think tank, and the American Enterprise Institute, which is a right-leaning think tank. I'm thinking to myself, we have a transformational approach to education that is supported by both the left and the right.
And neuroscience.
And neuroscience. What the hell are we waiting for, right? Like, let's move with things that have bipartisan support that we can actually move on instead of having fights about things we know we're never going to agree on. But just think about if we, over the next 5 to 7, 8 years, if we close the achievement gap and we started giving our kids real tools to deal with the trauma that they have been dealt, the adverse childhood experiences that they've been dealing with. So to me, that's the conversation. Like, why are we fighting about things like, and I won't pick an issue because we can pick issues. We're never going to agree on those in the next 5 years. Never. Things are shifting. But what are we going to do today? So here's, because I'm getting fired up now, Jack, I want to just...
Maybe you go back on the campaign trail.
We'll relaunch the campaign right now. But one of the things around climate change that we're really not talking about is the importance of agriculture as a solution to climate change. And it's regenerative agriculture, which a lot of people don't even know what it is. Basically, it's moving away from industrial farming into crop rotations, and you put cover crops over the off-season of whatever you're growing, you plant another crop. And so what happens is, over time, you sequester carbon. And the carbon just keeps going in the soil. In the soil now, and I was in Iowa, like the heartland of heartlands of agriculture. And I'm on these farms where people are doing regenerative agriculture. And they're showing me how dark the dirt gets when you continue to put carbon in it. And part of the problem we're having in the Midwest and the Central Plains with the flooding is that we've taken all the carbon out of the soil, sprayed it with pesticides, which are oil-based, and the ground is hard. So, and he was showing me dirt that wasn't regenerative agriculture dirt, and I had no idea we were going to be talking about regenerative agriculture here tonight, zero. But he was showing me...
Contemplation is a regenerative process.
We said we're going to come up here and play jazz, so we're playing jazz right now. So they were showing me how much water in little jars, mason jars of dirt. One was the bad dirt, one was the regenerative ag dirt. And you'd put it in water, and the bad dirt would just fall apart. The regenerative ag dirt that had a lot of carbon in it and a lot of minerals and everything, it would absorb the water. So what the smart people were telling us is that for every 1% increase in carbon in an acre of soil, that acre can hold 25,000 more gallons of water. So we've taken all the carbon out, and then we've thrown fertilizer on, because the soil can't feed the nutrients and help grow the crops. So we have to put all this fertilizer. But the ground's hard, so when it rains, the fertilizer runs into the rivers. We have algae blooms in the Great Lakes from all the nitrogen, and then it goes down to the mouth of the Mississippi River and kills 220,000 metric tons of fish every year. So it's killing the fish, and it's destroying the fishing industry. So I'm going to land this plane right now. The regenerative farmers are some of the few farmers that are actually making money, because they don't need all the overhead, all the inputs with pesticides and everything else. They don't need as much fertilizer and all the rest. And so they're making money. So the farmers are making money. They're sequestering carbon. We're getting healthier food. We're beginning the process of reversing climate change. And check this out. Some of the farmers who are pushing for regenerative agriculture don't even think climate change was caused by man. Who cares, right? I'm not going to sit here and fight with you about whether it is or it isn't. I think it was, okay? You don't, fine. Do you want to do regenerative agriculture? Yes. You want to sequester carbon in the ground? Yes. You want to make money as a farmer? Yes. Okay, let's move on that. And so what I was trying to run on was, how do we pick 3 or 4 of these transformational issues and get them done? And then in 5 or 7 years, we can have big fights about whatever we didn't get done yet. But that's what I'm saying about finding, and that's the art of politics. That's what we need from leaders today, is finding those issues that can pull us together. Maybe not 100% of the country, maybe 60 or 70% of the country, and start moving that agenda. And we all can prioritize it. And you have Republican conservative farmers who don't think climate change was caused by man, working with liberal, people who want to reverse climate change as a major priority.
So I want to piggyback for a moment on climate change, because it is so compelling, and we're living in times where there's this cultural anxiety because of climate change and economic injustice and racism and the various things we see. Tim knows this, one of the best things, if you don't know it, to read about climate change is this book by Paul Hawken called Drawdown, and it crowdsourced from experts around the world the 100 best solutions to reverse climate change. And the interesting thing is that at the very top is not solar or wind. The very top, in the top 5 or 6, one is food waste and agriculture. Yep. The most compelling, if you add 2 in the top 7 together to reverse climate change, is the education and empowerment of women. That would do more for climate change. So I commend the book to you, because it's what you're doing, Tim. It gives a vision of what we actually can do and what's possible for us.
I mean, think about, we're talking about regenerative agriculture, food waste, right? You want to talk to conservatives about conservation and not wasting and, being frugal? How do we figure out how to not waste as much food, which would have a significant impact? That's one way to come together. Planting trees.
Now, there's 100 really remarkable studies in there of things that we each can either do or foster.
And we have to demand as citizens, now that I'm not running, I can, help figure this out. But how do we demand that the conversation is around solutions that we can actually get done?
So I want to shift the conversation back to a different part of the contemplative dimension and I see them, we're kind of dancing between the inner and the outer, which is my sati sampajanya, which is mindful presence, and then a mindful response to the world. And what I want to say to you about the inner trainings, I was at the first White House Buddhist leadership gathering a few years ago under a previous administration. It ain't going to happen again soon, I can assure you. And we talked about the principles for a wise society, and there are everybody from Plato and Socrates to Lao Tzu and, Confucius and to the elders in Africa and the Mayan elders and so forth. There are visions of what is a respectful, caring society for individuals and the environment and so forth. The thing that was important to be able to say there was, while these are beautiful ideals that we can share to come together and to respect the environment and so forth, there are actually trainings and practices that we can do as human beings that give us the capacity to do that. Trainings in attention and mindfulness, trainings in compassion and loving kindness, trainings in emotional regulation, the kind of things that, again, that neuroscientists have demonstrated, trainings in clarity, which come through mindfulness, that it's not just that these are good ideas, but that we actually can learn them in ourselves, and it changes how we live in the world. And I want to give two examples, because I'm thinking about, you were talking about kids and education before. And the reason I want to give the examples is because they're small, and yet they show you something. So this is in the handwriting of a 5th grader, maybe 6th grader, misspelled and all. Dear Jack,
Like some people's Twitters.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh.
Sorry.
I came to
Did I say
your
that out loud?
meditation center with my school. I taught this, these kids. I didn't take any of that meditating seriously, spelled C-E-R-U-S, anyway, whatever, till I started getting in big fights with my parents and myself. And I remember the time we spent meditating, how it felt, because I was alone in this world. So I took the little knowledge I had one night after a long fight with my mom and went out on my roof and started meditating and tried to do what you told us to do. And when I opened my eyes and went back into my house, I was not as mad. I don't know what it is about meditating that helps me, but I know that it does. It helps let go of my anger and helps me control my thoughts. So thank you 1,000 times. We should learn this in school. So this was 1 hour, but it was giving kids tools. It was empowering. It doesn't take that much. And in a conversation, when you're in conflict or there's difficult things, you can take 3 breaths and get quiet. And then as you get quiet, there's a little secret thing that you can do also. You can ask yourself, what's my best intention? And when you ask that question, what's my best intention? There you are fighting with your spouse. I would never do that myself, but in case someone else had, or, with people around you or whatever, and you could react and say these things, but when you ask, what's my best intention? As you get quiet, it doesn't take long, a few seconds, you realize, oh, I want to work this out. I want to end up in a good place. I care about this person, I care about our relationship, or I love them or whatever it is, and your whole tone of voice changes. You can say the very same thing, what did you mean? What did you mean? Kind of aggressively, or you could say, what did you mean? I want to understand you. And that inner shift in the heart that comes from letting ourselves be quiet, from training ourselves a bit, how to be present for ourselves, then allows us to be present for another person. So it doesn't take that much. One more quick story. So I've also, over the years, been working with young men coming out of gangs in inner cities, Los Angeles, Oakland, Chicago, places, with this great group from Mosaic Multicultural Foundation, Luis Rodriguez and Michael Mead, and for a while Mali Doma Some, a West African medicine man, and so forth. So we're sitting in a room, and we've got a whole bunch of young men who are kind of with their mentors, maybe trying to get out of the gang life. And they say, okay, you're going to read us poems. Luis Rodriguez is a great Latino poet. You're going to teach us meditations. Man, this is BS. I'm out on the street. People got 9mm. You got to give me something better than that, right? So that's, and the hoods are up and the hats are on the back and like, come on, man, give me something better than that. So we said, you know, we really can't start our conversation together because there are too many people in this room who we can't see but are present with us that need to be acknowledged first. So we lit one candle, put it on the table, and said, would you go out in the parking lot and pick up a stone for every young person you know who's been shot or killed or died? And some of these kids came back and their hands were full of stones. Like no young person should know that many dead people. And then we asked them just to put the stone down by the candle and say the name. This is for Tito, and this is for RJ, this is for Homegirl. And pretty soon there was a pile of stones around this candle. And they sat back down and the hoods came down and they said, oh, okay, this is a place we can really talk about what's happened and what's going on. And there's something, this connects back to the meditation, because your ability to sit with yourself, with your boredom and your fear and your cultural anxiety and your own tears and the longing and beauty and love and all that you carry, as you learn to do that, it makes it possible for you to sit in the presence of another human being with what they're carrying, and they sense, oh, you can be real. You can get there for them. And things flower out of that that nothing else can do. So part of what I want to say is it doesn't take that much to do it, and it's not that you shouldn't do it regularly, because it's a very good thing to develop, and there's a reason it's called practice rather than perfect, right? It's a good thing to do. But even in short bits, it can make such a difference of how you're present for yourself and how you're present for another, and then how you respond to the world.
Amen. Amen.
Now we're doing religion
No,
up here, okay.
How do you have that in every aspect of our society, so that those young kids, whoever they bump into, is modeling that and coaching them up in that? And those are the social and emotional learning programs. We saw a great program in Chicago. We went and visited. It's called the BAM program, Becoming a Man program. And they also had a WOW program working on womanhood. They would literally get 55 kids. I think it was a semester, maybe a year. And those 55 kids, they would meet once a week together in a small group of like 12. And they would basically do that kind of thing that you were talking about. Like, it's real conversations, real tears, really opening up, and then they would do a one-on-one. And this is in the Chicago School District. They would do the boys and the girls separately. And it was coaching, it was life coaching. It was teaching how to be real and how to deal with your emotions and your anger and your pain in a constructive way. And those kids who never knew each other in those groups of 12 bonded and became best friends. And one was an athlete, and one was, in the band, and one, was in drama. And they bonded because they opened up to each other. And so we've got to reimagine and rethink how we're teaching our kids. And again, focusing on the social and emotional, health and well-being, trauma-informed care, before you even get to the academics, because your brain's not even functioning yet until you take care of that part. And we know the brain science. We know when you're in fight or flight that you can't access your prefrontal cortex. You can't access your executive functions, your working memory, your decision making, your ability to control your attention span. It doesn't even come online because you're in trauma. And so, we know that. We're here. We're at Stanford. Everyone in this room knows that. Every teacher you talk to knows that. and it's not yet made its way into the national policy discussions yet, not in the national conversation. It's happening in bits and pieces around the country, but not nearly like that band program. 55 kids in a school district of 10,000 people, 10,000 kids. I mean, it's time for us to go, speed up and begin to scale up these programs. And that's why I worry about the conflict happening at the federal government level, because you talk about climate change, you talk about income inequality, you talk about healthcare, you talk about social emotional learning in every school. Like, these are massive, we're going to go to the moon programs, and not that they all have to be big federal programs, but it's going to take the force, the weight, and the capacity of the federal government to get us to where we need to be in the time frame in which we need to get there. And so that's why I think there needs to be a certain sense of urgency.
So there's another piece I want to put in this conversation, and that is to talk about the possibility of change. When the Colombian government was trying to negotiate with the FARC, with the rebels, after this 50 years of civil war and so much death and so forth, and have more or less created peace in Colombia, one of the things that they did, which was really interesting, is they took helicopters and flew them over the parts of the jungle where they knew the revolutionaries were, and they dropped photographs of their family members. People had been out in the jungle for 10, 15 or more years, and here was a picture of their abuela, here was a picture of their brother or sister or their children or grandchildren having grown. And it was a really important move because it reminded them that they were bigger, that they were more than the revolution, that they had family, that they had community, that were part of a bigger world than that. And it began to change things. And so, of course, it makes me think, what do we need to do? Whose photographs do we need to put on the milk cartons and whatever? How do we do that? Then a second thing, just kind of building on this, there's a beautiful line or two from Ellen Sirleaf and Lehman Gaboui, the two women who won the Nobel Prize in Liberia. It was Ellen Sirleaf who said, "Liberia used to be known for its child soldiers, and now it's known for its women leaders." And I just want you to hear that possibility that even a society that's a wreck in certain ways and has been in a kind of toxic situation, that it's not the end of the story. It simply isn't, and where we are is not the end of the story. And it's important to hold that. And in contemplation as well, we talk about the suffering, was where you started, and really to acknowledge it and let your compassion hold us all. Human incarnation is hard. It just is. And modern life in all these ways is not that easy. And then you have technology on top of it, that takes you away from being real in certain ways. Albert Einstein, according to Scientific American, said, if you can drive safely while kissing a girl, you're simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. Okay? So we are distracted in these ways to not actually see each other or care for each other. But the point of meditation practice, it is not a grim duty. You're not doing it along with your jogging and diet and therapy and whatever. Maybe that helped you. I hope so. God knows. But it's not about perfecting yourself. If anything, it's about perfecting your love. And it's not a grim duty. It's actually meant to be joyful. And even if you're going to go out there and demonstrate, and I think about being with my daughter at the airport, and been to a lot of demonstrations, and she's a young kind of hotshot lawyer from Berkeley that's doing asylum law for her organization Oasis for LGBT who are in danger around the world, like gay guys from Uganda who'd be stoned to death, and she had a transgender woman from Saudi Arabia come, so she's doing that. But anyway, we all went down when that law or that presidential edict that these people from the 7 predominantly Muslim countries couldn't come in and people were stuck. And here was the thing. There was like 2,000 people down there. At our gate, there were 400. And they had their signs, and people were chanting, "No ban, no fear, refugees, welcome here." You know how demonstrations are. They're actually kind of an old form. At our gate, in the middle of it, was a New Orleans jazz band. So as we're chanting, the drummer gives us a nice rhythm. The sax player plays a little riff on top. Then the trumpet comes in and gives us a melody, and pretty soon we're doing "No ban, no fear, refugees welcome." The whole thing we're singing. The cops are smiling. The security forces are like moving. We weren't going away. We were there. We were going to stay. But it wasn't this. It wasn't against. It was artful. It had beauty to it. There was a Hands Around Lake Merritt that year in 2016 or 17. Some of you might have been there, 5,000 or 10,000 people. I want to do 1 million people hands around Congress without saying anything, just to show that this is who we are. So Molly Ivins, who you might have known from Texas, who is a really great writer and journalist and activist, she said, "So keep fighting for freedom and justice, beloveds, but don't forget to have fun doing it. You know, be outrageous at all the oddities, and when you get through celebrating the sheer joy of a good cause, be sure to tell those who follow how much fun you have." Because we're not going to make the change through judgment and finger pointing and anger. If we're going to change it, the only force that's big enough is really the force of love. It is. And that means to love everybody, even some people who you might find some wanting to exclude from that. And in my loving kindness practice, I think about dictators and various political figures. I can wish them well. May you be free from hatred. May you be free from fear. May you be free from ignorance. May you find peace in your heart. I can wish that for anybody, for Duterte in the Philippines, wherever it is, that there's some way in which we can hold the possibility, and we need to.
I need to reinstitute my loving kindness practice, I think. And one of the practices I did a lot during the campaign was Tonglen, which is, because a lot of times you hear in the New Age movement of like, push the negativity out, push the darkness out, and all that. And Trungpa Rinpoche, one of the books I read from him, he was talking about Tonglen, and you actually breathe in the darkness, the negativity, and you use your body and mind as like almost like a clearinghouse. I'm not a teacher at all. I'm just like this is what I do. And you breathe out the lightness and light. And so you become the vehicle of cleansing of sorts. And it is super powerful practice, because what I think in my own mind is like you try to push it off, like, and that's when whatever it is in your own mind has control over you, because you're in a fight with it. And I remember I was at a retreat with Sylvia Boorstein one time, and she says, if you're ever in a fight, it's bad, because you're in a fight, right? Like nobody wins a fight. Like it's at the end, you're in a fight. And so if you're fighting these ideas and the negativity, so the Tonglen was very, very helpful for me over the last few months to help keep some semblance of a balance and not trying to push it all down.
It's a really powerful and beautiful compassion practice. There are a number of compassion practices, and it's one of the most powerful, where you take in the suffering and send out goodwill. I'm aware we're coming near the end of our time, but maybe we'll take another 5 minutes or something. Are you good with it out there? They're nodding. Okay. Just say a couple things, and then I'm going to ask you
can I say something
lead a
real quick?
Tonglen at the end. But go ahead.
Oh, that's awesome. Because what you were talking about, it was just a thought that has been reoccurring to me about where we are as a society, and I know we talked a little bit about this. if you think back to most of the people in the country, and I was watching a few months back the Ken Burns documentary on Vietnam. Have any of you seen this? Super powerful documentary. And they were saying in the documentary, America, love it or leave it. And I was watching the documentary on the airplanes. And in the news, what reemerged? America, love it or leave it. And then I was listening to the radio in the car. You guys, planes, cars. I laid that groundwork earlier for you. And I was listening to, there was a Billy Joel song on, the We Didn't Start the Fire song. Harry Truman, Doris Day, Red China, Johnny Ray, South Pacific. Well, it goes through the whole thing. And I just thought to myself, Jack, we have a generation of people who started their lives in their elementary schools climbing under desks in an air raid drill. And then just, you can trace, that's traumatizing. Like, let's admit it, that's scary for a little kid. And we're dealing with that again now, today, in all the schools around the school gun violence issue in the schools. But you're under your desk in an air raid drill, then it's President Kennedy, then it's, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and then it's Vietnam, and then all these people go off to Vietnam, and you hear the stories of it. And last summer, the moving wall, the mobile Vietnam wall, came to Warren, Ohio, where I grew up, right, the town next to where I grew up. And thousands of people came to see the wall. And so I was there for the whole weekend as congressman in my district. And I remember going there thinking, man, these poor parents, what am I going to say to them and everything? Because I was just kind of driving and thinking, I'm like, the parents are gone. It's the brothers and the sisters. And the number of tears that I saw that weekend, the pain, and they call it the wall that heals. And I thought, man, this is so healing. And the stories of, I lost my brother, I was 14, he was 18. Right? They're crying. I'm crying. I'm crying now, just telling you the story. And they would bring these roses up, and they would walk up to the wall and lay it down in front of the name. And here they are in downtown Warren, Ohio, 2017 or 18, crying over what had happened so many years before. And that's what we're carrying with us as a country. The loss of jobs and dignity, and Vietnam and air raid drills, and now the school shootings and the lack of basic health care and all that. It's all right there. And we've got to take a time out and acknowledge that. And that we got a lot of pain going on, and we're not going to move forward until we acknowledge it. And when I was watching that documentary, I just thought, man, we're carrying this pain for a long time.
Being here at Stanford and being particularly in the business school, I'm reminded of the fact that I was invited here about 10 years ago to do a program. I got a call from one of the senior professors and then one of the deans and so forth. Would I come to Stanford, to the business school, because we have the most accomplished students you can imagine, and they're also really ambitious, and they hit this graduate school running, and they're trying to find companies that are going to work for. And Stanford's turned into a tech school. It's like MIT now. Most of the humanities, everybody wants to make $1 billion in the tech world. It's become much more of that. And they're driven, and they end up their 2 years trying to get themselves on the ladder so much that they lose touch with themselves really a lot. And so that this professor and dean were really worried about the students here. and can I come and help? And I said, so, I'm trying to understand what it is you want me to do. And they talked about students, being so busy, but underneath there was loneliness, depression, not knowing themselves. Okay. I said, okay, so it sounds like what you want is something like soul retrieval, right? And they said, yeah, that's right, Come down, and I did. I brought a couple of CEOs from very big corporations who are friends, who are also meditators, as you know, sort of that universe, to talk about a different set of values. I guess I'm saying that here because it's, these problems, whether it's income inequality or climate change, which affects us all, or continuing so forth, it's really clear that there is no technological solution. No amount of internet and computers and AI and nanotechnology and biotechnology and space technology is going to stop continuing warfare, is going to stop racism, is going to stop climate destruction, is going to stop the things, the inequality in the society. That won't come from the technological world. So it's important to say this here in Stanford and Silicon Valley. The outer marvels of technology, which are incredible, in my pocket, in my phone, is the Great Library of Alexandria and 3.5 million cat videos, right, or whatever. But all of that, but the outer developments now have to be matched with inner development for humanity, not only to thrive, but to survive in some fashion or other. That this is really what's laid, it's what you're talking about, Tim, and in some way it's the whole contemplative series of days that you're offering to say, this is the place that humanity actually has to work at this point. And to do it well, we have to be willing to face the difficulties. There are two kinds of tears in meditation. There are the tears that come from our own personal grief or loss or trauma or healing that come, which are important to be able to weep, because if we can't, it's bottled up in us. But there's another kind of tears that are called the tears of the way, the tears of the Dharma or the mystery or the Tao or something. And they're not because something personal happened to you. They're the tears that come because your heart starts to open and you realize, we're in this together. And you worry about the kids on the border. I went down to a homeless shelter in the Tijuana side to help teach, and there were all these kids there. And, it's hard to sleep picturing them in my mind, but it's not just them, it's those all over. And then those tears become something that fertilizes, like you were saying, the soil, and that something really wants to come out of you. And each of you has a gift. Everybody has something that you can contribute to the world and to the things that you care about. You can't do it all, but you can do something. And when you look back at the end of your life, you really have to ask myself, in this time, did I center myself? Did I quiet the mind and open my heart and then listen to what I could do? And that's the only way you're really going to be satisfied or happy. I have a little story to read, and then maybe Tim will lead us in a Tonglen practice. An urban school teacher in the Tenderloin, San Francisco, liked to give sandwiches to the homeless people in her neighborhood. If she wasn't tired after teaching, she'd get home from school, she'd make sandwiches and then go down and distribute them. She didn't care if she was thanked or they refused it. She didn't do it for the gratitude. There were hungry people. She wanted to feed them. After a time, the local media found out about her work, and she became a kind of minor celebrity in her area. Fellow teachers and friends then began to send her money for her ministry. To their surprise, they all got their money back with a note that read, "Make your own damn sandwiches." And this is like the last thing to say to you all. We are kindred spirits, kiddo, but Tim ain't going to do it for you unless we make him do it. You remember what Lyndon Johnson or, Roosevelt said, that's a great idea, now make me do it. That it has to come from us, and it can come from us. Tonglan, 3 minutes?
I am not teaching. I will let you teach.
Courage.
Yeah. I'm going to let you do that. I'm not a teacher at all. When you said who's new to meditation, I'm like, I'm new to meditation.
Okay, 2 minutes. Just let your eyes close gently for a couple minutes. And let yourself, as you sit quietly, feel inside whatever's been touched in you in this conversation, in these words and stories, because they're reminders to your heart of something you already know. And you know that to pick this up, to carry this and bring forth what's good in you, what's beautiful to contribute to this world, it's going to take a lot of compassion. Compassion for yourself, for all that you've gone through, for your fears and losses and struggles we all have. Tenderness. Compassion for those who are suffering around. And even compassion for those who are ignorant and causing suffering, all those beings. We've all been there, we've all caused our own suffering to people. And as you reflect, let yourself feel that within you is the great heart of compassion. That you can breathe gently and let the sorrows of your life and the world touch your heart. And be transformed so that as you breathe out blessings and good wishes and a tender compassion to hold the struggle of everyone. This awakened heart, the great heart of compassion and loving awareness. This is who you really are. It is your birthright. It is your true nature. Let yourself remember this and stay connected. And thank you. He's a pretty cool politician, wouldn't you say? For one of those people, you know.
It's a very, very low bar. No, I'm kidding. Let me.
Gesture of
Oh my
gratitude
gosh! Thank
to
you, thank you,
enjoy
thank
a
you,
cup of tea
thank you.
and nourish yourselves as much
It says pause, exhale, attend, connect, take a drink, and then express. Thank you.
Express.
Yeah, thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
you
you all for
for
coming.
being here.
Thank you to Jack Kornfield and Congressman Tim Ryan. Thank you.
See ya.
If I could just say one more thing, because I'm a politician and we're never done saying stuff. I'm a member of the House. You're lucky I'm not a senator. They get really carried away. But I just want to thank Jack. One, I love him. But thinking about what you did with Spirit Rock, and when I was in Barre, Massachusetts, when I did the retreats there with the Insight Meditation Center that you all started there. The idea in today's world is like, how do we fix things right now? How do we fix things like I was teasing earlier about, you have 30 seconds, go tell me how you're going to fix the healthcare system. What we want to, I think, reestablish is the seeds that Jack and Joseph and Sharon planted back then. I don't know if you ever could imagine that it would have turned into what it turned into, but like when we leave here, those little seeds that we have to plant, and if we all plant them and we water them and we give them sunlight and fertilizer, that they can turn into something really, really big. And when I think of Jack Kornfield, I think, how many years ago, when all this stuff was super weird to everybody,
Still is. But
and it is still to a lot of people, but it's been studied, it's been researched. That's what we have to do. Little seeds that we plant, each of you as you leave here, who knows what they're going to turn into. And it could be a little seed that you plant into a school district. You get somebody elected to the school board who is into social and emotional learning or whatever your thing is. And what if it just over time transforms that one school district? And you can look back 20 years from now and said, we did that because we got so-and-so elected to the school board, or we work with this teacher. That's the spirit that we should leave here with. So.
yay.